that's where we can come together and create our own reality and move away from a reality that these elites want to take us to. And that reality is towards this social credit system. And you talked a little bit about the white hats, and there was a white hat leak with information, and it looked at plans of the elites, which is this system, and it's called the CSRQ system. It's a software system, and the C means common, S is sovereign, R restricted, and Q is the quarantine, and they are classes. And so I'll just read a little bit here. What is the financial reset? It is a restructuring of the world's financial system. It will transition the world from a multi-currency capitalistic system to a one-currency centrally controlled system. When will it happen? Well, between 4 to 6 months from now and no later than 2024. It appears the timeline to initiate it has been moved up, and we've seen things happen right now. Things are like speeding up with events that are happening globally right now, and we expect more to happen. Can it be prevented? It says here it is unlikely. The CSRQ software and the USDR currency system is now nearly completed and will be brought online once the financial collapse occurs. The public is essentially powerless to stop the coming coordinated events unless a mass awakening takes place. So we have it right there that, it's going to have to be a mass awakening that's got to take place to stop the system from coming into fruition. And I want to talk a bit about the class system in the CSRQ software. There are 4 classes: common, restricted, quarantine, and sovereign. Now, the first 3 comprise of 99% of humanity. They will have strict limits on assets that you may own and require mandatory vaccinations, even a carbon credit score, or carbon score they call it. Now, they're pushing the carbon thing right now, as we see right around the world, this whole climate change carbon thing, which really ties back into this. And they all have, as I said, this carbon credit score. You will receive a certain amount of money, which is that UBI thing, and you will receive heavy penalties and fines for behavior that is not approved. The system is similar to China's social credit scoring system, but more robust and stringent. The sovereign class comprises less than 1% of humanity. It is a hidden class and highly classified. It will never be disclosed to the public. Sovereigns do not have any restrictions of any kind, and they are not required to receive vaccinations of any kind or have a carbon score. They do not have social or carbon scores they must adhere to. So that is what we are possibly looking at if we don't wake up right now, and we could be heading down the road into a system just like that. I call it a very advanced, divisive, structural classism system. Common class is basically you have to have a vaccine, you have a carbon score, so you're only allowed to use certain amounts of technology, cars and vehicles, and you get a certain amount of money, and you're labeled as the common class because you're behaving, you're abiding by the rules. But if you decide that you want to kick up a stink, or you disagree with the government or disagree with something, and you then will get put into the restricted class. And if you kick up more of a stink, you're moved into this quarantine class where your money's taken away, you don't have access to food, you're basically locked away in some sort of camp. Onto this website called Oculum Labs, which gives a real breakdown on the whole scenarios being played out, the wars that are going to be in place, but the different avenues that these elitists are going to take, and they're using AI to do a lot of the predictable movements and move their chess players or chessboard, what would you call it, on the chessboard. It seems random, but it's actually all connected, and I think this is what it's connecting everyone to. This is going to be the nail in the coffin if it's not exposed and stopped or not complied with. I think that's the avenue we'll probably take, is not to comply with it.
I thought that they meant sovereign being like they were a bloodline.
No. So sovereign are people, you've got to meet a certain monetary level, but
mm,
also your contribution towards bringing this agenda into fruition, you will be rewarded by being put onto the sovereign class. And there are people I would
yeah.
not have thought would be on there that's actually on there. And they're basically going to try and wipe out the middle and upper classes. So even those, some that are going to be rich, are going to be brought back down into the common class. And these ones who are rich, they might have 1, 2 million, even $5 million. They still won't actually reach the sovereign class. They won't be up there, but they'll be brought back down. And I think a lot of people will actually see that, who are in the common class or the lower classes will see, wow, yes, the rich, we're bringing the rich down. And to me, people won't realize that actually there's another level above that. And so people will want the rich to come down to the level that they're on. And
Mm-mm.
also with this UBI, you're going to get third world, or what would say, developing countries who are going to jump at having a UBI as well. So, there's a whole bunch of things being played out that I think people need to be aware of, because it's going to fool a lot of people.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And what you're describing is something that we're not seeing in Vietnam yet. And I'm kind of wondering when they're going to drop the hammer, because it reminds me of the scenario in 1984 where you have the Pacific region, and then you had the other region. I can't remember the term that they use in the movie, but they had two very distinct regions. And the Pacific, which is the Western classes of countries, was all tied up in propaganda and this, and they were fighting a war that didn't exist. You see, and whereas the opposite side was just like kind of like business as usual. So I think, well, they're not going to be able to do the entire planet. I think it's impossible in one foul swoop. They are working on the toughest nuts first, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Developed countries, I think they're hitting developed countries first because it's going to be easier. Um, I'm just feeling, because you've got people in, say, for in Vietnam, who their livelihoods are based on actually cash. Being at the markets. I mean, I've been out to markets in the urban area, sorry, the rural areas of Vietnam, and you got old women there who are still, exchanging in cash. They didn't even have money to buy an FPOS machine,
Mm.
and so it's going to be, I'd say, hard to try and transition them out of that. But I think if you're in some of the developed countries, I think the implementation might be a lot more quicker, robust, especially if your people in those countries are dependent on something from the government. Like if you're dependent on a benefit, if you're dependent on a pension,
Mm.
then those things will actually be held and dangled, um, you
Yeah.
know, in a conditional way. There's conditions then now if you want to have this or if you want to have that. Whereas
Mm.
people in countries like Vietnam aren't going to be in that scenario.